Hello, and welcome to this conversation. We're here with Ellie from Paris and the Midwest. Ellie, why don't you just share a little bit about yourself? I love your Substack, and it's good to see you as always. Yeah,
All
just share a
right.
little context here.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Jeff, and welcome everyone who's joining. So, yes, my name is Ellie. I have a communications consultancy and I live in Paris, France, thanks to my husband, who is French. But as Jeff mentioned, I was born and raised in the Midwest and have since lived all over Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C. But now I am based in Paris. I don't know if the term based is cringe. Maybe we'll have time for that at the end of our conversation. But yeah, that's who I am, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And we actually met up in the Marais like a year and a
Yes.
half ago. That was fun. It was so nice to meet you in person. And personally, I love that combination of the worldliness of Paris, but also Midwestern background. But one of the things that you do on your Substack is push back against a lot of narratives, like especially this idea of like moving to France and your life's going to be perfect. And could you just talk about that a little bit, and then we'll dive into the
Yeah,
mommy discourse.
100%. And there is a through line here. So thanks for the question. So yes, I live in Paris. I'm very, very lucky to live here. I'm married to a wonderful man. He has a wonderful parents, extended family. But sometimes when you tell people that you live in Paris, they confuse living in Paris or living in France with going on vacation there. And I'm not complaining about my life, but I pay taxes. There's another heat wave right now. That's why it's so dark in here. All the windows are closed. I grocery shop. I do all those kind of day-to-day things. And there is sometimes a mismatch between the perception and the reality. And I have found that a lot of people, very well-intentioned people, they think I'm on vacation all day. And they'll be like, oh, like, do you do XYZ? And it's like, well, maybe I do, but I'm actually really busy just like working like everybody else and, doing paperwork or something like that.
Yeah, I'm one of these people who definitely romanticizes the Paris lifestyle. You know how to wear a scarf in the perfect kind of way. Um, but I it completely makes sense everything that you're saying. Like life is still lifey, even when you're living in Paris. You still have to deal with different challenges, and in some ways, you do you miss the Midwest?
I do. I really do. And it's not just like the gigantic convenience stores and the 75 flavors of ranch dressing. My family's there. So of course, I miss them, my wonderful nieces and my wonderful nephew. Kind of the warmth and the familiarity, the air conditioning, all of those, the accoutrement of the American Midwest, but definitely happy to be here.
Yeah, and I associate you as a good. We both have lived in Washington D.C., and I think can speak a similar language there. But
Yeah.
let's get into the mommy wars. We're here to talk about mommy discourse and specifically stay-at-home moms who whine and complain. And I think we initially on the surface fall on different sides of this issue. But before we get into that, like I think it might be helpful to just share where we're coming from on this issue. Like,
Yeah.
do you want to just share a little bit of that, like just your status? You're married, do you have kids, not kids, like that kind of thing?
Yeah, so married, no kids. My mom was mostly a stay-at-home mom, but also a farmer. So I just want to state my prior that I think stay-at-home moms, they do a really important job, and we can talk about that later on, but definitely an important part of the fabric of American society. Where I come in with a little bit of pushback is some of the discourse that I have heard, and it's not everyone, it's just things that I have heard in certain communities I'm in that it is the hardest job in the world. No one does anything more difficult. And no matter what you do, it will never be as hard as this. And that's where I've got some questions.
Yeah, we're gonna dig into that. Yeah, and just so my vantage point, many of you guys know me. So I'm a dad. I have one son who's 8, and I had my son at age 42. So I was a single, gay guy for most of my life, and then I'm also a gay dad. And I'm the lead parent. When my son was born, I was like the lead. I did stay at home dadding for a while. So I, I'm on team stay at home parent on some level. At least I have some experience with it.
Yeah.
Like that. But so yeah, so let's get into it. So I'm curious, like where, and you and I are coming at this from completely different contexts. We'll get into that later. But where do you find these women who are like, oh, it's so hard, like being a stay-at-home mom's the hardest thing in the world. Like, I don't come across that. Where do you see it? Is it online? Is it personally to you? Like, how does that show
Um,
up?
yeah, very good question. So it does exist online, but I have seen it show up in the real world, in some circles of kind of like the Americans living in France, which is sort of its own like subspecies of person. But I also see it a lot in like women's networking, women in business groups. And again, it's not everyone, but people saying things like, well, I know you started your business, but can you imagine what it's like for those of us with kids? And I'm like, I don't know. I have a vivid imagination. Try me. Use your words. Explain it to me. Like regale me with these tales. I'm all ears. And that's where I've kind of seen that. And then there was one writer, and actually for whom I have a lot of respect. It's very sweet. And I said to her, well, other people do face difficult things. It's not the suffering Olympics, but if you have a spouse who's gone through a very, very serious health crisis or an elderly parent or something, that is very hard. It's that kind of care work. And this person's answer, and I think it didn't come across the right way, but it's like, well, that would be harder if you had kids. And it's like, well, I don't know. My life would have been harder if I was in the Battle of Antietam and had to get my leg amputated with no
Yeah.
anesthesia. I don't know.
I'm I'm
And
literally
that's,
right by the Battle of Antietam field right now. Like, my cabin's in that area. So
oh, all right. All right. Well, I don't want you to have your leg
funny.
amputated on this trip.
No, no, exactly. Okay, so you've seen it, and then do you find in your personal life, like, how do women react to you? I mean, do you find like they ask questions in a different way about family stuff?
Yes, and I'm glad you asked that because I kind of wish they wouldn't. I feel like some people like they don't know where to place me or something, so they'll be like, "Oh, do you guys like have kids?" And I'm like, "It's totally okay to ask. It's a fine question. A lot of people have families and you shouldn't feel like you have to tiptoe around this." And I've even kind of heard some parents say things like, "We don't know if we want to go there for dinner because then we have to bring the kids." And I'm like, bring your kids. They're great. I love them. So there might, I'm glad you asked because there might be some weird tension there that I believe people are well intentioned, but it's like just because I don't have any doesn't mean I don't like them. I'm perfectly happy to like whatever, like
Well,
turn on a cartoon with your kids. Like,
well, it was funny when we were preparing for this. Like, I think in our exchange, one of the things that I realized is given our different demographics,
mm,
we probably get annoyed about different things. Like, in my demographic, when I'm around middle-aged gay men, they're the default is not to have kids, obviously.
yeah.
Well, not in all cases, but yeah, pretty much obviously. And they say things, they don't, they're well meaning, but they'll say, like, they'll compare kids to having a dog. Like, oh, well, I don't have a kid, but I do have a dog. And they'll sometimes have dramas like, oh my gosh, today was so hard. The hairstylist cut my hair wrong. Or sometimes it's frivolous, sometimes it's heavy stuff like that, but sometimes it's frivolous. And I'm like, I want to roll my eyes and be like, guys, come on. Could you imagine, your problems aren't really that big. So I kind of get insulting comments from the other direction of like, wow, you have a kid. Like, how does that work? And then in particular from gay guys, especially older gay guys, like, they're kind of insulting and annoying at times without
Mm.
even realizing it. Um, and I remember when my son was born not long after, I went all in when he was an infant. And I remember telling one of my best friends, I was living in Logan Circle, trendy neighborhood in DC, the gayborhood basically. And I would like push my stroller around and like go to the coffee shop. And I loved being a dad in an urban setting, was awesome. But I
Yeah.
remember one of my best friends was like, do you want to go to a movie? Let's go to a movie, Jeff. And I said to him, like, do you realize how hard it is? I have a baby. You have no idea how hard this is. And what I realized is I was guilty. Looking back, I don't think there's anything wrong with me complaining that
Hmm.
parenting was hard and a huge adjustment. What I do think is wrong, I think what you've helped me realize is it was kind of an asshole thing to say, oh, you have no idea. Because then I'm not just complaining about my situation, I'm comparing it to his life. And this is a friend who, he lost two parents.
Oh.
He dealt with really difficult high level job stuff. So I look back and I think like, wow, that was kind of an asshole comment to make. So I'm on your team when it comes to that, and I think that's a good point. At the same time, I look back and I was like, yeah, it did feel hard, and then yeah, I did need a space to complain, and women communicate differently too. So like I can hold space for women, stay at home moms, especially I'm one kid, and that was hard for me. And I'm not naturally cut out for it. Like these women who like have 5 kids at home, like I have no idea how they do that. That'd be
Yeah.
really hard. From my standpoint, that'd be really hard.
Yeah. I like what you said about how people it's when you compare it to someone else is when it maybe and we've all done that, right? That's when it ventures into like kind of obnoxious because I made a joke about it earlier, but it's like, well, I don't know, if we go down that road, it's like at least you don't have smallpox or like at least your house
Right.
didn't burn down. Like, okay, thanks. Like that's super helpful. And yeah, that's what I've seen. And I do understand. Like I'm sure like having kids, it's a massive life change. Like every way you kind of manage your day, manage your finances, prioritize things is completely different when you have one, two, three, or five, living human beings under your care. Um, but I think there is space within friendship, let alone planet Earth, to understand that everyone has kind of like things going on in their life. They have different things pulling on them, things weighing on them. And when it becomes this kind of suffering Olympics or whatever, is when it becomes like, in my experience, really grating. And I personally have seen quite a bit of that.
So I want to make this distinction. Do you get annoyed when women are like, oh, it's so hard? Oh, it's just I can't deal with this, and they're kind of talking to each other and complaining, kvetching or whatever, and maybe exaggerating it in an exaggerated way, or is it exclusively the minimizing comments like, Ellie, you have no idea how hard this is. Could you imagine doing everything you're doing with kids? Oh my gosh. Is it the
It,
latter or is it also the former?
I would say the first thing you mentioned, I might kind of inside roll my eyes a little and think like, okay. But at the same time, people are allowed to say what they want to say to each other. And if they're not saying it to me, they're not insulting me. Like, well, there's a lot of annoying things in this world. I think the second thing you described is where it really like grates on me. And it's like, imagine if you were a mama. And I'm like, okay, like, that's where I find it grating. Because imagine how it would feel if I said to someone who's a stay-at-home mom, like, well, I know you think that your life is hard, but you don't have to worry about things like your mortgage and your retirement account. Somebody pays for that. Come on, what do you even do? Like, that wouldn't
So
feel very good, you know?
totally. And I'm 100% with you on the minimizing, and I defend you on that. And I can completely relate. However, you've also made some posts that are like being a stay at home mom is not hard. Isn't that minimizing them? Aren't you being a little bit of a hypocrite?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. So, to that, I would say, I believe that many different things are hard. I think being a bus driver in France is hard when the bus doesn't have air conditioning. I think working at McDonald's would be so hard to be like on your feet all day. There's a lot of really hard things. What I have heard, and these are like real examples, is like it's like being in a World War I trench. Sometimes it's like a rat is gnawing on my leg. It's the hardest job in the world. And that's where I'm like, oh, come on. Like, come on. Like, do you think that? Like, another person was like, I was like, well, I think being like a fighter pilot would be hard. Like, I don't think I could fly F-16s. Like, I get car sick, you know? And they were like, ooh, what's a big deal? That's operating heavy machinery. And I'm like, so I have literally heard these things. I've literally heard these things. And that's where like, and I see what you're saying about the hypocrisy, but it's like, isn't there kind of a space between like, yes, many, many different people's lives are hard. They go through hard things. We can say that without saying, being a stay-at-home mom is like being in a World War I trench, like on the Western Front.
Yeah, I mean, I roll my eyes about that stuff too, and I can also understand how it's annoying when if you're in spaces where it just takes up all the oxygen in the room,
Yeah.
and there's no space to kvetch or vent about other issues. Like I can kind of understand that. But like my first impulse was to defend the stay-at-home moms. I'm like, that's kind of mean. But with the context of where you're coming from, I can see why you're pushing back against that narrative, um, and so forth. I'm wondering, do you think there's something structural in the way women communicate that adds to this? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is. And I think, especially for women who are at home with children all day, there might not necessarily be an obvious vehicle for these conversations. If she's literally at home, homeschooling kids all day, she doesn't necessarily have that water cooler to go to that we might have at work, where you can kind of complain about like the annoying email or whatever. So that might show up for her in some of the communities that I'm in that are both online and real life. And that is just her water cooler where she's kind of letting it out. And I totally get that. And I also think in a world where, for better or worse, especially Americans, well, I think the West, we put a tremendous value on credentials,
Mm.
achievement, job, salary. And when you're caring for small children or even caring for an elderly or sick relative, you are working hard. It is taking a lot out of you,
Mm.
but there is no outward validation coming in. Like, there is no bonus you get for that. There is no media mention. And to that extent, I can understand why a woman who is working so hard to care for her family, it's like, could someone please just see me? And I understand that impulse. I really do.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I think there's empathy there. It seems like you get that they may feel isolated, bogged down with their colleagues or like, their kids. They feel isolated. They feel bogged down. They feel like it's 24/7. There's no alone time. They're pulling their hair out. And I think if they're type A, they're probably like always feeling behind the curve. Like it's never clean enough and never organized enough. Never, how can I get dinner ready? Blah blah blah. And yet, like, I think they're, and I'm going to grossly generalize. I feel like women bond more by complaining about things than men do. I'm going to
Yeah.
go out on a limb there. Like, at least, like, you know, in my experience, the stay-at-home moms, like, they would like go on like power walks together, or like meet for lunch, or like have little circles where they would, like, I don't know, play dates and so forth, and talk in a much more real and authentic and also kvetching kind of way.
Hmm.
Whereas I don't think men, I mean, first of all, stay at home men, if you're a stay at home dad, you're kind of a little bit in the shadows to begin with.
Yeah.
Um, and I think their style, like I don't want to say it's embarrassing for a man, but it is in our cultural context a little bit like it's different.
It's different.
Eh,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think there's that difference, but then I also think the style of communication, like women are much healthier about expressing their emotions. I think men can like bottle things up and probably like don't complain about this stuff as much, just to grossly generalize.
No, I
Does
think
that resonate? Is that a fair assessment, or what do you think?
I think it's completely accurate. I think, for example, when a woman says something like, I'm so overwhelmed, I didn't have time to get Shabbat dinner ready, which, by the way, is sometimes me on a Friday because I had a bunch of dumpster fires to deal with. They, of course, happen at 4 p.m. Um, she's not literally saying to you, I'm so dumb, I don't know how to put together a salad and put the chicken in the oven. She's just saying, I've had a confluence of things and I have these feelings that are completely normal and I need to talk through those feelings. And I think maybe a lot of husbands and wives or boyfriends and girlfriends encounter this where your girlfriend is like complaining about this email at work or whatever. And then the boyfriend says, like, um, have you considered marking those emails as spam? And then she's mad because she's like, it's not about the email, it's about whatever. And then he's like, why are you mad at me? I told you to mark it as spam. And that's a dumb example, but um, it, I think that answers your question. And this is the last thing I'll say on that, unless you want me to say more. I think even in our professional lives, we do that. Like, so I work in comms, and sometimes it can be really stressful because a reporter wants something or the client has these really high expectations, and I'll kind of complain to my friends about it. And it's like, Ellie, do you think this additional quote in the press release is the worst thing in the world? Is it an abomination? Is Earth's magnetic field going to rupture because you don't like the structure of the press release? Or is it just like very annoying and you need to complain about it for 3 minutes?
Mm.
It's just annoying and you want to complain about the additional quote in the press release for 3 minutes. That's it.
Exactly. It's like venting, right? And there's also that stereotype of it's like, honey, I don't want you to fix this. I just want you to like listen to me, like vent, right? Like that's a thing. And that works for. I have that. I think men are like that too. Maybe a little culturally, just a little less. It's a
Yeah.
little different. We like want to fix things instead of just being with them in their venting. So there's
Hmm.
something there. The other thing that I guess my takeaway from like parenting was like, wow, it reminds me of traveling in a third world country because like you're like, and that was my analogy at the time. Like, I don't know what I'm going to expect. Like, I turn the corner and something wonderful happens. I turn another corner and I'm like vomited on. Um, I noticed that I realized like most parents are just trying to make it work and doing the best job that they could. I noticed that the bar for women is really high. And women are really hard on themselves and others at times, especially in
Yeah.
certain socioeconomic contexts. Like I live in a pretty affluent area, and there's some really wealthy women who were like all thin, blonde, married to wealthy finance guys or whatever, and like, and they're high powered under themselves. So I'm not trying to make them sound less than at all. But I kind of sometimes feel I feel bad because the bar is so high. Like the expectations are so much higher for them. And I notice as a guy, like as a dad, the expectations are a lot lower. And I'm like
Mm.
completely cool with that.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. Like I remember the first time I took my son on an airplane. It was just me and an infant on an airplane. And that's hard with the first time you're doing it. But I was like kind of clueless. I was like, oh,
Mm.
and a woman comes in and her like four boys march behind her. And everybody ignores her. She had everything together, but all the women were around me like, do you need help? You know,
Ugh.
and I was like, yes. So there's like a different I'm sure I probably broadcasted that I was clueless in that moment. And that's why they were like that. But also, I think the bar is a lot lower for men. And I don't think men put the same kind of, in general, I'm generalizing, cultural expectations on themselves like, to be like the best stay at home parent or the best, like moms, like a lot of moms I know, especially if they're type A, they want to be thin and hot and a good mom and like still high powered and like read the latest books and like do their nails. And like, that's a lot of pressure to like hold it all that stuff together. Um,
Yeah.
So I kind of want to be like, whoa, just, it's okay to not be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you mentioned kind of the different socioeconomic backgrounds because I think, and I'm hoping someone can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but it's an observation. If you are a woman who went to a competitive high school, a very good college, you worked in banking for 10 years, your markers for success are somewhat clear. They're imperfect for many reasons. And you get that kind of feedback in the workplace, and you can control a lot of it. Not all of it, but a lot of it, especially with like upper middle class, like UMC, PMC jobs. With a human child, it's not. It's not always within your control. It's kind of like you can do the very, very best spreadsheet, send it to your managing director. He loves it. You double check the numbers. But if your child gets sick or something, it can kind of derail your whole morning or your whole week. Never the mind that you're concerned about something that isn't really within your sphere of control. And I'm not suggesting these women are controlling. That's not my point. But I think that could be a massive. I think it could just it could not a reality check. That's not the word. Just a massive transition for someone, especially someone who's used to like dotting all the I's and crossing all of the T's. And I also think maybe we might see different things in religious communities where, again, I don't know. I'm just kind of sharing whatever.
Yeah.
In Orthodox Jewish communities or conservative Catholic communities, there might be an assumption that all women are hardwired to be perfect mothers and absolutely love this. So I could imagine maybe a traditional Catholic mother of four who feels really stretched, feeling like there's this pressure for me to be perfect and love all of this. And like all my kids are wearing their fancy dresses at church on Sunday. but I'm struggling inside and I don't feel like there's an outlet for me to share how I feel right now because my community set the bar, maybe up here.
Yeah, that's a great point, with the religious communities and the context that you're in. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, as a gay dad, I can be friends with I was nervous when my kid went to school. I was like, "How do I be a school parent? How do I navigate alpha moms in this, like, environment? What's that even gonna be like? How will they interpret me?" And I realized, I'm a guy who, like, plays the cards that I'm dealt the best way I can. And what I realized is like, oh, this is kind of an advantage because I can be bro friends with the dads. Like I'm not like crushing on that. It's not weird that way. Like I'm friends with them like I would be with any guy, in the no homo kind of context, right? And then I can be friends with the moms as well. And we can have like, because it's harder to be friends with other guys if you're a mom and have long conversations. Because then
Yeah.
it's just a different dynamic. And then I can also be friends with the single moms because there's
Mm.
also weird sometimes the dynamic between like married moms and single moms. And at times I've done like Brady Bunch dates where a single mom and her daughter will like go to dinner with me and my
Oh, that's so
son,
cute.
and that kind of thing. And so I've tried to develop empathy. I think, the guys often have a lot of pressure themselves and they,
Yeah.
especially as a provider, like go make money. And in this world where more women are going to college and out earning men in certain cases, like there's still, at least in my environment, the cultural expectation that men provide. And when you're living that, upper middle class lifestyle or whatever, like that is a lot of pressure
Yes.
on the guy. And then also, of course, I think they want to be a good husband and father and in shape and look good. So there's some of that pressure too. But the
Yeah.
moms, there's a lot of pressure and it's more holistic. It's like they have to be this, they have to be that, and so I really empathize with that. And then that's people with resources. And then I imagine what it's like, to be a single mom without many resources and just trying to make it work. So that's why like I'm inclined to, jump in and stand up a little bit for stay-at-home moms, but I don't think that excuses minimizing other people and using language that's insulting or pretending like, you know, uh, pretending like raising your 3 kids is the equivalent of World War One. So I completely get that. But going to a Pilates class, like these Pilates moms, like that's intense. Like you know,
Yeah.
like, I could barely handle yoga with these women, but, like, try to go to Pilates with them. They work hard. They kinda kick ass. Some
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Pilates is no joke. I haven't been in a while,
yeah.
but it's no joke.
Do you have good abs?
They're fine. I mean, they're acceptable. I mean, I feel like for 40, they're not bad.
Yeah, yeah. Well, where should we go with this conversation? What would you like to?
Well, I was thinking about this and I kind of joked with you about it over chat on Substack, but like this has just been on my mind. Like toxic empathy versus real empathy, and some of these conversations I see especially on the right, but they exist on the left, where it's like ha ha ha, cat ladies own the libs, and like on the left it was go mine coal, right? If you lose your blue collar job or you lose your coal mining job, it's or excuse me, learn to code. Like so if a coal miner loses his job, he's a worthless racist piece of shit anyway, so ha ha ha, he should go get a job at Twitter. And I just feel like we have this bizarre, like, overcorrection of empathy, but like lack of empathy, where it's like if someone commits armed robbery in like San Francisco, they should not go to jail, but instead they should go to like a drum circle or something or like whatever. But like also, we shouldn't have empathy for like a 35-year-old woman in New York City who is still single and she's trying to meet someone. She's trying to go on dates because she's a stupid girl boss cat lady loser who voted for Mondani. So LOL cope.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
possible. Like, tell me what you think.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to unpack. I mean, first, I think you're right. A lot of the language that is talked about with women living their lives, trying to live their best
Yes.
lives, and these are awesome women, it can be insulting. And I wrote an essay called "Incels Are the New Queers," and I was defending
Mm,
guys against the incel term because it was used as a signifier just to like cast off and give the ick to different straight guys in particular. And
yeah.
as I was writing that, I thought, is cat lady the same thing? And have I done that to women who are childless? And there's a stereotype that I think 10 years ago was really culturally ascendant of like the 40 something, liberal woman who isn't married and has like lots of cats crawling all over her who's going to scold you and be a schoolmarm. And there's definitely some truth in that
Right.
stereotype, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think like any language, it has a context and like a moment, and then it becomes abused and used too broadly. And I think that's what happened with incel as well, by the way.
Yeah.
So to the point where like just because a woman is like over 30 or doesn't have kids, like calling her a cat lady is pretty flattening and demeaning in the same way that incel is.
Yeah, I'm glad
Um,
that you mentioned the incel because I have seen that and it's such a like slur because it's like here's this guy who maybe through no fault of his own he's not educated or he's struggling to find a job, this that and the other thing, but it's like by calling him an incel, it's almost worse than just calling him a loser because it's like you're some kind of like pervert or weirdo. You're not just like pouring down on your luck. You're like a freak. It's almost like a Foucauldian dividing practice or something. By casting them as the incel or the cat lady, we've removed them from our space.
yeah, yeah, we're otherizing them. I mean, we're giving them an ick or a stink, and
Yes.
we're making it worse. And like, I'm not above it. Like in some cases, I will say, like, okay, I did defend incels, and I don't like it used too loosely because a lot of people who are being called incels are like having sex all the time versus the actual definite. You know what I mean? It's like I don't even know what this means. But I mean, so what I'm trying to say is, I think there are people who are probably quite literally incels and maybe deserve that label on certain level, and the cat lady Karen stereotype similarly. Like, but the targeting range for me, I wouldn't use those labels just that loosely and recklessly. Maybe I don't even know if I'd ever use them, but I think it's fair to use them in some contexts. But like you said, I think it's just because somebody doesn't have a kid or just because a guy is, doesn't fit the normal mode, like it's really rude and flattening to use these slurs.
Yeah,
Um,
and I do agree. Like they have their place and I'm sure I've used them before, but it's when it's flattened and applied to everyone. And also like on the cat ladies and obviously I have a dog in this fight. Like I didn't get married till I was in like my mid late 30s and there's been a decent number of very vocal like pro family conservative women who are single or did not get married till they were a little bit older and they've really pushed back on that term and I'm glad. And by the way, some of them are very successful and very beautiful. So when I see people kind of throw that around, like, oh, she's just like a loser cat lady sitting in her DC apartment, I'm like, her apartment is really nice and she's absolutely gorgeous. So maybe just like think about these words you're using.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's like I want to be friends with them.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like they
maybe
seem
maybe because
great. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and yeah, and for me, it's a little bit of the opposite because, it's like a gay dad. It's like that's its own
Mm,
cultural expectation. That's, now it's more mainstream and new, but it's still on the right, especially. It's not really that normalized. Some people, have issues with it. Um,
yeah.
and the default is the expectation is that if you're gay, you're not going to have kids. In a way, I think that it's freeing right now because the option is there to have it and or not have kids, and you can. There isn't a cultural expectation either way. But I think moving from the funny uncle to having the opportunity to be a dad,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. And I remember when I was going through the process, my conservative friends, in many cases, the tradcath types, who I don't really like tradcaths, but I love these individuals.
Yeah.
They probably have the same attitude towards me. They didn't agree with necessarily like my having a kid in theory, but they were really sweet about it.
Yeah.
And so And whereas like some of my gay friends were like, especially older gay friends, were like really mean about it. And as I dug deeper, they secretly wanted to have kids, and there was that going on. And then once my kid was around, the tradcast types were sweet. I mean, once a child's in the world,
Yeah.
there's that. Where I mean, so were my gay friends actually. Once a kid's in the world, I think things change, and it's really universalizing. I did expect that I would want to like hang out with other gay dads, and what I realized, at least in my experience, was a parent is a parent, and it's really universalizing. So those, yeah, sure, it's nice, but I could just go to the playground and hang out, and hang out with other parents was just fine. But then there were the people who, and I'm rambling a little here,
No,
who
I'm
were like,
listening.
"There's no such thing as gender, Jeff." And then there are people who are like, "Oh, how dare you bring in a kid without a mom?" Both of these are big. That's a big deal. I had to wrap my head around. Like some people were like, "Oh,
Oh,
that's not a big deal." And I was like, "No, it's kind of a big deal." I had to really think that through. And then the other friends who were like, "There's no such thing as gender." I was like, uh, "Come with me to the playground. Like, let's just observe." The dads, like
right.
me, like the moms know everybody's names. I'm generalizing again.
Yeah,
They would
yeah.
like know everybody's names. The dad would be dads, like, including myself, would be like walking the perimeter, like on their phones, like looking for threats. They would not know the little kids' names. The boys
Yes.
and the girls, the toddler boys and toddler girls would play pretty differently. So I'm not like a total gender essentialist. Like I don't think it's everything, but it's certainly a real factor. And I think it's also fair to say that women in general are better with younger kids. They're just
Mhm.
biologically, you know, made to have kids, right? In a way that men aren't.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
yeah, just introducing those thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to what you said about some of your older gay friends because I do think, and this has just been on my mind because some of the like queer stuff that's come up is like it. There are older gay people who are living and breathing today that they grew up in America in a time where they really might have been quite ostracized, perhaps by their own family and high school and their communities, and having a family might not have been an option for them. And so I have to wonder if for some of these people, not all of them, there might be a little bit of pain there, which I
1,000%.
understand.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And so then maybe there's a parallel there too, of like sometimes that pain can come out as bitchiness. And
Yeah.
if I could dig into it a little bit, 9 out of 10 times there was that pain. But I also have a lot of older gay friends who married women, had kids, and then came out
Yeah.
later on. So there's that, and yeah. But yeah, the pain of not having the option to have kids is there. And then there's some people who maybe regret having kids. I mean, I haven't. People don't really talk about that. Um, I don't know. Have you heard any of that discourse?
I see it come up, but I feel like it like comes across my screen and I keep scrolling. It's like bizarre essays in like The Cut or something or Slate. If anybody knows like the genre I'm talking about where it's like I had 3 kids and this is why I regret it. And I'm like, first, I truly am so sorry. Like I'm so horribly sorry. Second, do you have a therapist? Do you have a family connection? Like, yeah, but some of them I don't mean to downplay someone's real pain, but it kind of comes across as rage bait to me. Someone tell me if that's uncharitable, but it yeah, that's what it reads as to me.
Interesting. In our replies on one of our exchanges, there was a woman who was a new mom, and she replied to you, I think, saying like, "Oh, I had heard all these women complaining. I thought motherhood was going to be so hard. It just actually discouraged me from wanting to be a mom.
Mm.
But then I became a mom, and it was hard, but maybe not as dramatic as these women made it out to be." And I wonder, do you have any thoughts on that? Just how the mommy excessive complaints there might scare off other women from having kids.
I do think it's very real. I can just share what I've observed. I do think it scares people off. And I also think to a certain degree, as our society kind of becomes more bowling alone, people are less tethered to religious communities where things like motherhood, fatherhood, and family might just kind of be part of your daily life. So it might not be that shocking, when you're 28 or 30 and have your first kid. But I saw that person, and I think she was half joking or whatever, but she replied like, if you read these things and took them at face value, you would literally think that daycare costs $76,000 a year. You will not sleep for 8 years, and you will not have a shower for 2 years if you read like what these people say. And it's like, I I can see that where people's
Mm.
maybe exaggerated or kind of in the moment comments or complaints, when they're aggregated in the bowels of Reddit or maybe, in weird corners of Substack, people read that and think it's true. And when they're not tethered to like a community of people with kids or a multi-generational community, they might be receiving some like really weird things about kids. Cause I've ran some of this by my sister, and I'm like, yeah, Liz, someone told me that like kids don't sleep until they're 3. And my sister was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Or like I
Yeah.
asked her about like diapers, and like I was like, how often like does a blowout diaper happen? And she was like, almost never. And when it does, sometimes it's because the diaper was on wrong, or you had like the wrong size because your baby was growing. But she was basically like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting, and I don't know if this is a gendered brain thing, but or dad brain, but like I remember when my kid was an infant, I was like, oh, this is basically an algorithm. Like you eat this much, you
Oh,
sleep this much, you do this and have this many naps, and then based on his weight, oh, he's finally 14 pounds. Now he can drink a whole bottle and sleep the whole night. It's almost like I remember that first year felt very algorithmic.
huh.
But I've never heard women describe it that way. Um,
I've never heard anyone describe it that way. I like that
yeah.
mentality. Like it maybe helps contain the newness and the challenges of it. But yeah, I do think there's a very real thing there where people might be getting some very strange ideas from the internet. Because surprise, surprise, people say weird things on the internet. But when it's compounded by not being, like I said, kind of tethered to like a multi-generational community or a family with small children, people might internalize some weird ideas, and they might become somewhat self-fulfilling. I don't want to impose that on anyone or assume, but it's just kind of a like, I mean, this is a silly example, but if everybody tells you how terrible French bureaucracy is, and it's the worst bureaucracy ever to bureaucrat, and all they want are these papers, you're going to be like mentally charged for this. And so when you go to like the city hall, it's almost like you've predetermined that there's going to be a problem with your file, when it's like, well, what if someone told you compassionate, grounded in fact information that's like, hey, this kind of sucks, but here's 2 or 3 things you can do. Maybe you'll have a different experience. And I don't mean to compare like raising a child to like renewing your visa or whatever, but I just mean like the way people get information with the right amount of empathy. Like,
Having a kid to renewing your visa. That's funny. Um, yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, for those of us who care about like natalism on some level, I mean, I know it's an overused concept, but those who are concerned about that, it is something to think about, like the effects of if you see people catastrophizing about how hard it is to have kids, like you're going to be less willing to have them. We're not trying to shut down venting; that's perfectly legit.
yeah.
But it is a consideration that's out there. I'm curious, how do you think about, let me back up. When I was a kid, I asked my mom, what's the purpose of life? And I was raised Mormon. And Mormons have lots of babies. And she said, oh, the purpose of life is having more life, pass it on. And I interpret that literally as having kids. Later on, I thought, oh, you could pass on life in all these other kinds of ways that don't involve kids. You could be a church organist. You could, write a book, whatever. I'm just curious, how do you think about um, your legacy, or yeah, how do you think about that? What does that bring up for you?
It's a good question. And I should be clear, like my husband and I have not ruled out kids. I'm not for, against, or anti. Uh when I think about my legacy, um minimizing the tax burden of French inheritance laws. That would be the first one, because they're absolutely egregious. They needed to update those since the revolution. Um, hmm. Honestly, it doesn't really like cross my mind. I don't know if that's like a bad answer, but I'm kind of reminded. Is it Radio Days with Woody Allen? I forget the movie where like he encounters like these aliens from outer space and he tries to ask them like what's the meaning of life or something? Like why am I here? What's my purpose? And the aliens from outer space tell Woody Allen's character, they're like, you're really not a philosopher. If you want to make the world a better place, tell funnier jokes. And for years, that line has always stuck with me because it's like we can and ought to ask ourselves these really big existential questions, but at the end of the day, if we want to have a legacy and we want to make the world a better place, be your best version of yourself. Whether that's a stay-at-home mother, a teacher, a World War I person stuck in a trench, like whatever it is.
I love that. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes we can be grandiose a little bit about those things. So that's a great answer. Be the best version. You did mention that your husband and you haven't written it off.
Yeah.
And it cut me off if it's too private to get into, but do tell. Can we red pill you on having kids? I'm just joking.
Yeah. I will say, what I always like to tell people, and I will say women laugh when I say this, even in professional settings, because they'll be like, oh, do you and your husband have kids? And my line that I love to go is, we're working on it. They laugh, and it's a sweet thing. But yeah, not for or against. And I will say something very sweet. There's a creche near our home, and it's so sweet. Creche is the state-run daycare. I call it government daycare. I refuse to call it free daycare. It's government daycare. Your kid goes to the state. But it's very sweet because after school, if I happen to take a walk, these little ones literally run out to their parents or grandparents and like throw their arms around them. And it's just so adorable. It's so sweet.
Do you notice different attitudes in parenting in France versus America?
I love this question. I will preface it by saying whatever people might imagine of like this very thin, chic Parisian woman, like with a perfectly behaved child, remove that from your head. The parents here, men and women, are just as tired, stressed. They have all these things going on. They're arguing with their kids about chicken nuggets at the grocery store. But there are some distinctions where I think a little bit of the French mentality might be helpful to Americans. One big one is on the playground. Even when children are younger, the parents are a little bit more hands-off on the playground. Children are expected to play on their own, to kind of adjudicate disagreements on their own. And it doesn't mean the parents are ignoring them, but it's more like they're not going to sit there and applaud the kid for going down the slide every single time. There's an expectation that like Camille, the 4-year-old, goes up and down the slide on her own. And I think that's good. Another thing is starting, I think even in creche, which is daycare, the government daycare, the children get a meal. Now it's a simple meal, but there is an expectation that like you sit, you have a fork and a knife, and you eat your food. Like, so I think those are some kind of nice, some nice little differences. But no, French kids do not eat everything. We've had our friends over and the parents will call us before and be like, we're just going to bring some pasta because we're kind of going through a phase right now.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Anybody listening, if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to share. Yeah, ask away in the question area.
Yeah, you guys have been a little quiet.
Yeah, a good crowd here, but a little quiet. So, where should we go with this, and how do you want to wrap up?
Well, if there are no questions, I think, maybe what I would say is going back to that empathy question, like where do we have an empathy over correction, but also an empathy deficit is just thinking about, because I'm sure many of your readers and listeners also think through these public policy issues. how can we talk about these different populations and these problems with reality, but also empathy, right? And I don't mean the weird toxic empathy, but it's like, if you care about birth rates, stop calling people stupid cat ladies or incels, and just real, or, if you care about like employment and opportunities for upward mobility, stop it with the like learn to code. That's from like 10 years ago, but the point stands. And I just think, as someone who works in policy communications, we have to think about meeting people where they are. And it doesn't mean affirming them all the time, but saying, I hear you, and here's a potential path for that.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I think it's such a good point about empathy too, because especially on the right, I think a lot of people have PTSD. I see this among like right wing guys in particular. They have PTSD from weaponized empathy, like pathological empathy, right?
EPTSD, empathy
Yeah.
PTSD.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. EPTSD. They have EPTSD. And therefore, they swing in the other direction of just kind of not having empathy and often look like kind of jerks, right? And I think that's just as bad, if not worse. So I think you're absolutely right about having empathy. And then, I've been on this kick where I like I had to figure this out while I was running. I was like, I kind of like stereotyping, but I don't like flattening people into one identity. I hate it when people see one slice of my identity and want to define me by it, right? So I've always tried to
The
look at people.
username that has just entered the chat is really like wonderful timing for that.
Right. Yeah, I'm not even going to say that. But yeah,
I will
but yeah.
not.
Yeah, so I think it's fun to stereotype a little bit, like it reduces cognitive load, like it's playful. Like I'm not a school marm about that, but I'm really against flattening identities when you're just seeing people through one slice and really like not seeing them as a full human. Like I
Yeah.
really value seeing somebody as a whole person. And I think that's the problem that I have with incel and cat lady and some of this discourse, especially on the right. It just completely flattens their identity. They're doing the exact same thing they hate that people do on the left, like the woke people do on the left. They're doing it in an even meaner kind of way. Um,
Yeah.
so I think having more empathy and just recognizing that everybody's a whole person and carrying their own struggles, it was a good thing to hold for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it's somewhat compounded because many people on the right, they do have an attitude of like self-sufficiency and hard work. And of course, those are wonderful, wonderful values and character traits. But it's like, do you really believe that every person who's experienced hardship or maybe their business didn't take off or whatever, it's because they're stupid and lazy? That doesn't check out to me. So just to your point,
Mm,
like there are kind of these categories that we all put people in. And some of them are funny. Some of them are funny, let's be honest, but they shouldn't be done to completely flatten people, denigrate them, or frankly say things that are not even tethered to reality, right?
right. Yeah. And I think we should be careful not to do that to stay at home moms.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that's my just. um, yeah, that's a great note because it was funny because I think, I've always respected you and liked you, and we have similar outlooks, I think. And when you had some of the posts about stay at home moms, I was like, I didn't get them. So it was interesting to dig. I'm really glad we had a chance to dig deeper and understand the context, and everything that you've said is makes a lot of sense and is completely valid. And I've really enjoyed this conversation,
Me
Ollie. So
too.
thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Even you, sir, with the extremely creative username.
Yeah, yeah. And there are a lot of guys in here. I was expecting moms who are
Yes.
like I was expecting stay-at-home moms who are like organizing the pantry and washing stuff. I'm joking about that a little bit. But
No,
like
that was what I thought too.
why are the guys here for the mommy discourse?
Yeah. Well, one of you guys share in the chat what inspired you to join. I'm truly
Yeah.
curious.
And maybe maybe it was drama, but maybe there's like a secret latent male, like men don't really get to complain. Like, and there may be something there to tap into. Like, that's a whole topic unto itself. How a lot of men have to like hold things together and button it down, and that's a cultural expectation for better and for worse. And
Yeah.
like I think in marriages, like women define like emotional labor as like empathy and stuff like that. There's also emotional labor of holding space and creating a sense of stability that I think men exercise as well.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway,
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for having me on. This has been such a fun conversation. And if anybody's interested, you can follow or subscribe to Based in Paris. That is my Substack.
he is very based. Um, and you can follow me at Jeff Giese, Giesea. Subscribe and follow, and yeah, and hopefully we can move past this lower level, lower consciousness mommy wars, and just have empathy for everybody together. So thank you, Ellie. I think it's great.
Okay. Bye,
Okay,
everyone. Have a
bye.
great day.